What's up, everybody? The king has arrived, fresh out of the shower, messy haircut and all. So you go to the fish store, right? You see these little cost-effective fish between $3 and $10 called Convict Cichlids. I can assure you they are the best choice you can possibly make. Or are they? Stay tuned for this ultimate Convict Cichlid guide. Alrighty, so first up on the guide, I want to talk about tank size. Now this is very important with these fish because you don't need much, but you do need enough. Now, you have 4 options with tank size here. The first option is going to be 10-gallon tank, but that is only for rehousing fry. Now you could go lower as even like a 5-gallon or a 3-gallon for rehoming the fry. But the thing about that is you're going to run into water quality issues really quick. So I would always go with a 10-gallon for rehoming fry, for growing them out slightly, and always use a sponge filter for that. Next option we have is a 20-gallon tank. This is going to be for anywhere between 2 and 4 fish. These fish get big, but they don't get so big that 20 gallons can't accommodate them. As long as you're doing appropriate water changes, you have proper filtration, and your parameters are good, 4 is still about the max I would go because they can still get pretty large for a 20-gallon tank. Now, 29-gallon tank you can use as a breeding tank for a breeding pair, which is personally what I do. They don't need much more space than that. 29 gallons is perfect for breeding. And if you have that 29-gallon tank and that 10-gallon tank, you can have a space to rehome the fry each cycle. Then I would also have a 55-gallon tank for your main display of these guys, right? 55 gallons, you could probably go as many as 12 to 15, if not even more than that, as long as you have appropriate filtration and you're keeping up with your water parameters and your tank maintenance. Never forget to do your tank maintenance and don't be lazy. That's the most important part about fish keeping, hands down, regardless of what kind of fish you have. Now we go to temperature. So you have a very narrow range with these guys of your perfect water temperature that you want to try to maintain on a day in and day out basis. 78 degrees Fahrenheit to 82. Anywhere in between that range, your Convict Cichlid are going to do perfect. Now, I have seen them survive in lower, between 72 and 74. I would never do that long term, and I would never go below that for more than like a day or two if absolutely necessary for whatever reason. I've also seen them survive quite efficiently actually in 88 to 90 degrees, but the only reason for that was an ammonia scare. When I first got the 55-gallon tank, I had to bump up my temperature to 88, I think it was actually 89 degrees Fahrenheit, and I added like 3 tablespoons of Epsom salt. That eliminated the ammonia issue. All the fish survived it, they were fine. Never do it that high long term. Make sure you're always checking your water temperature or having one of those little stickers on the side of the tank or some kind of thermostat so that you can monitor your tank temperature, okay? Make sure if you have your heater submerged, it is a submersible heater, because those things that are not, if you submerge it, it can short out and fry your fish. Not a good idea. So pH. How do I explain this one? Well, 7.8. But do not start adjusting pH if you are not going to maintain it for the entirety of the tank. The reason being is once you get those fish used to that pH, they're going to thrive, be healthy. It's going to be that extra little step that you need to make those guys even happier. But if you start it and stop it, and that pH goes down, you can kill all your fish. They are fine without that pH. You do not need to adjust the pH of your water whatsoever. It is not a hard requirement. But if you start it, it's going to help, but maintain it forever. That's the only issue I have with pH and telling people to adjust their pH, is that once you start, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. Chemicals are sketchy, okay? There is like a Aqua Tetra brand of pH razor that works well. But what I would suggest is get you some African cichlid substrate, which is like the shells and ground coral. That stuff is going to raise your pH naturally, and you can test it to make sure it gets it to that level. But it's difficult to do it with just the substrate. It's worth it, but difficult. Always keep that in mind. If you start doing anything that's going to change pH, make sure you get it to those levels and stay at those levels forever. Do not stop. Now we get to everybody's favorite part of the videos: temperament, aggression, and personality. So with convict cichlids. To other species of cichlid that are around the same size, I've had zero issues. Perfectly agreeable, and they can hold their own. Now, if you have a breeding pair, I would suggest personally you keep them by themselves. That is when these fish go from relatively passive to ultra aggressive, right? If you got a breeding pair, like, it is so crazy, like, you can stick your fingers in the tank. Normally fish are gonna swim away from you. It's just in their nature. Animals are scared of people. That's how it goes, right? So you stick your fingers in the tank when you have a breeding pair. They're about to lay eggs and fertilize them and do their thing. They're gonna go after your fingers, and best believe they're gonna tear some of that skin off if you have bigger ones. Trust me, a breeding pair needs to be kept separate. If you're mixing males and females, only have a breeding pair 29-gallon tank. Outside of that, their temperament, you know, it can depend on fish to fish. Like, each fish is going to have their own slightly unique personality, but for the most part, you're not going to run into many problems with these guys. Personality wise, you know, they'll swim up to the tank, interact with you a little bit, you know, nothing special, but nothing dull that's just going to sit there and look dumb, right? They're not, you know, comic goldfish where they're just going to swim up to you and then go back to being oblivious to everything around them 10 seconds later, right? These guys are great fish, but just like any other cichlid, during that breeding time, they're going to obliterate anything else in the tank. I've even seen videos on the internet where people will have a convict pair and then they'll have a big Oscar that's like 10 inches long. These convicts are constantly going after that Oscar with no hex given, right? So super aggressive during breeding, perfect personality outside of that. Always keep that in mind. Yep, we got convict cichlid fry yet again. Pretty good load of them right here this time. It's actually a lot. Make some good feeder fish for the other cichlids. Filtration. What is the best filtration for convict cichlids? Always sponge filters. Always. Well, almost always, but I'll get to that. So, sponge filters are going to keep the entire tank clean for the most part. What I would do personally is whatever size tank you have, at least double that on filtration. So, for example, if you got that 20-gallon tank you're keeping convicts in, use 40 gallons of sponge filtration, minimum. Remember, the only thing that is going to hurt your tank about overfiltration is the amount of space that those sponge filters are going to take up. Now, the reason I wouldn't use hang-on backs is because convict cichlids have a lot of babies. Unless you're keeping, you know, 4 males or 4 females or, you know, whatever, you know, you're keeping all of the same sex of fish, they're gonna have babies, right? If you keep 1 male and 1 female in any amount of mix up of those sexes of fish, they're gonna have babies. It's almost a guarantee. Actually, it's a guarantee if your parameters are correct, right? Those babies are gonna get sucked up into that hang-on back filter. They do not stand a chance against it. Sponge filters can actually hold that smaller bacteria on the side and those smaller particles of things that the fry can eat. So sponge filter have those benefits. The one advantage that hang on back filters have is you can slide these bad boys into the back of them. Now, I personally use these nitrate packets. They save time with water changes and they help remove nitrates in the water. Not a requirement by any stretch. I wouldn't get a hang on back filter just to be able to use these, but if all you have is already a hang on back, get you some of these bad boys. Get you some of these. Like, they are great for many things, but they'll remove cloudy water particles, they'll remove nitrates and ammonia. Definitely don't just use these, still do your water changes. This is just gonna make the process so much easier, trust me. I'll leave a link in the description of where you can find these. Best sponge filter brand, AquaTop, hands down. Cheapest, best brand, works the best. Plug your pump in the top, set it in the tank, you're good to go. Make sure you wash it in tank water first. Always make sure your tanks are cycled. Best filtration out. Alrighty guys, back again with a new video here. I want to talk about the worst possible tank mates for convict cichlids. Now, quick disclaimer, we're going to disregard completely obvious answers to this question, such as a horse, a cow, a dog, a cat, a bear, a shark, a giraffe, alligator, python. The list goes on, but we're being reasonable with fish you can buy at a pet store on average. So I'm going to do sort of a top 3, maybe 4 worst convict cichlid tank mates, but the thing that I want you guys to stick around for is the surprising worst tank mates for these guys. So the first one that I wouldn't suggest is any form of snail. Now, convict cichlids alone, I've housed successfully with snails, especially as fry who have grown up with the snails already in the tank. However, if you keep a community tank where they're mixed with like Africans and other species of fish, the other African cichlids will actually eat the snails, and the convict cichlids will pick up that habit because I've seen it happen before. So I would avoid in a community tank where you have a bunch of fish, and especially different species of fish. I would avoid putting any form of snails with these guys, regardless of what kind. So the next species I would avoid would possibly be any form of mixed breed convict, such as a polar blue parrot, who I actually have in there in that tank. He's swimming towards the bottom right now, so you can't see him. He's pretty beaten up, and matter of fact, I'm going to show you guys. That's the other convicts. That's not the bigger African cichlids doing that to him. I've seen it. It's the other convicts. So any sort of mixed breed convict cichlid type, I would really suggest avoiding. He's a gorgeous fish, but shouldn't have put him in there, but he's kind of stuck now. So the thing about convicts is they're relatively docile until breeding time. And we all know, if you've seen any of my videos or ever looked up videos about convicts, they breed like crazy. Always trying to have babies. Always. It never fails. That one right there, she's already ready for breeding. I know that by the orange patterns on her belly. But anyway, they can be super aggressive during that time, and you really need to have them in a community if you're going to have multiple male-female convicts, or just separate a breeding pair. I would either suggest all males or all females. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that was a female, so we do have some convict aggression in this tank. As you see, the other species of fish in here are relatively calm right now. And the main culprits of all this aggression are these convicts. But that's just because that female's ready for breeding, basically. They also can interbreed with Jack Dempsey's, which are these darker fish here. So you have to be careful of that. So here's the thing, worst tank mate, hands down from my experience, is honestly other convicts during breeding time, or just in general. Like, I've had convicts with extremely docile fish before. I've even had them with the goldfish. Yes, the goldfish got along perfect. It just seems that their aggression is always towards each other. It's never towards the other species I have in here. Even the other species that were once smaller than these convicts, they are super aggressive to each other. It's like they just can't resist fighting. You know, of course it's nothing major, you know, they're not lip blocking, but there's always that chasing, that super territorial fighting over the female in here. So, really would suggest against keeping a bunch of these guys together without some other species, or without having so many of them that they can kind of distract that aggression, if that makes sense. So always keep that in mind when you're housing these guys, that they can be quite brutal towards each other, especially if you slip up and put a female in there and not even realize it. Anyways, like, subscribe, share with your people. Thank you. Stay fishy.